Hello movie viewers and movie lovers. My name is Tim Williams, and I'm the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. We talk about all the great and sometimes not so great movies from the 1980s. From blockbusters to cult classics to lesser known treasures we discovered on cable TV or the now defunct video rental stores from our childhood. No matter which flick we choose for each episode, we'll have a lot of fun sharing our memories, discussing our favorite scenes, and even learning some behind-the-scenes stories about the cast and crew along the way. So let's jump right into today's episode. Thanks for listening. No bikinis, no blankets, no bingo. This awkwardly titled 80s flick is a bosom-buddy movie about a friendship that was destined to be. Like Surf and Turf, M&Ms, Laverne and Shirley, Lucy and Ethel, maybe even Cagney and Lacey. As most buddy movie rules require, it is a tale of enduring friendship between desperate souls formed against the odds. Their ups and downs, jealousy and redemption, and thanks to Bette Midler, show-stopping musical numbers. So grab some tissues because I'm sure tears will shed as Bethany Wells and I discuss Beaches from 1988 on this episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. Welcome in, everybody. Glad to have you on another episode. Glad to have Bethany back. Welcome, Bethany Wells, the wonderful wife of Laverne Wells. The wind beneath his wings, may I dare say.
I don't know how I feel about that.
So glad to have Bethany back on the podcast. Always a pleasure to have her with us. So, and she has read the book that this movie was based on, so we're gonna dig kind of pretty deep in this one. So let's get started. How are you doing, Bethany? You excited about this one?
I'm doing pretty good. I've calmed down from all of the crying earlier, so we're good now. Right. Honestly, this one, I don't know if this one doesn't hit me as bad as Steel Magnolias does.
Yeah,
I still get a little choked up, but it's not quite as bad as the last one.
Yeah, I agree. This didn't hit me quite as hard watching it again as I thought it would. And it was funny because I was almost through and my wife came in and she was like, "What are you watching?" I said, "I'm watching Beaches." "Oh, the saddest movie ever made." I just walked out of the room. It's like, oh, at least we know how you feel about it. So
yeah.
But anyway, so let's jump right in. So when did you see Beaches for the very first time?
Oh gosh, it was probably something my mom watched and I watched with her. Mm-hmm. It came out in '88, which was the year I was born. So I didn't see it in theaters.
No.
But I do remember watching it as a kid a little bit. But because it is such a sad bummer of an ending, it's not something my mom watched a ton.
Right.
But it was something she appreciated. If it was on, we would watch it together.
Gotcha. Yeah, I saw this one on VHS. I shouldn't say I have a distinct memory of this movie, but I don't remember if it's the first time I saw it or I don't think it was the first time. But actually, a friend of mine, Derek Deal, and if he's ever listened to the podcast, what's up, Derek? Derek Deal was a good friend of mine. This was probably in '89, between '88 and '89 when it was on VHS. And he had seen it first and told me that I had to watch it. I don't think that we watched it together the first time. I think he just recommended it, and then I watched it. I was summer of '89. I was between my 8th grade and 9th grade years, so between middle school and high school.
That's a weird movie for an 8th grader to watch.
Yeah. There was that one, and then another movie that I think of, Derek, was a movie called Stealing Home with Mark Harmon and Jodie Foster. If you find it, it's a rarity, but it was another VHS melodramatic, very heavy emotional movie, but it was really good. So he was good about those kind of movies. So I have this memory of Derek recommended the movie Beaches to me, and then we went to the beach. We went to Ocean City, Maryland. We were living in Maryland at the time, and so I don't know if he owned the movie, but for some reason I remember us watching this with two girls that we met at the beach, one afternoon. It's like we're gonna have this tearjerker movie. Or maybe he watched it. I don't remember. But I associate this movie with Derek because I remember him recommending it to me and being like, that's a weird movie to recommend to your friend. But
in eighth grade.
In eighth grade. Well, yeah, we were we were cool like that. So
yeah.
But I can't really say that I was a Bette Midler fan before that, but that made me really appreciate who she was as an artist, and I loved the music, the songs in it. I had the soundtrack. I had the vinyl LP soundtrack for this. I probably still have it somewhere. I was going to try to dig it up, but so when all the songs came on in the movie, I was like, oh man, I remember this. I remember these songs so well. So that was my first experience. So, and I think I watched it a few times then, and then when it came on cable, I remember recording it, and I would watch it. I think mainly for the music performances, more so than anything else, because that's what I really remember of the movie more than anything else was all the music in it. So it's like, is it a musical? It's like, is this a musical? It's a quasi-musical?
I listened to the commentary, and Gary Marshall was very quick to say it is not a musical. But a tidbit he did bring up was at the very beginning when she is rehearsing at the Hollywood Bowl.
Right.
The piano player that's helping her rehearse is Mark Shaman, who wrote the music for the musical Hairspray on Broadway.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And he also picked the songs. He helped pick the songs that were used in the movie Beaches, including Wind Beneath My Wings.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about that as we get going, too. So we'll see if our stories coincide or not. So,
okay.
But cool. So when was the last time you watched it all the way through before watching it for the podcast?
I would probably say it's not one that I watch a ton.
No.
But back when Lifetime released their version of it with Idina Menzel,
right?
I think I started to watch it, or I was like, ooh, in order to get ready to watch this, I'll watch the original. And then I don't know if I ever did watch the Lifetime version.
Yeah. So. I didn't see that one, but I didn't see very good reviews for it either. And I think I remember that when it came out that it did not get very good reviews for it. So, but even I'll probably at some point I'll probably watch it. But
I still want to watch it. I love Idina. Mm-hmm. We're best friends, so I call her Idina. But yeah, it was one where I was like, oh yeah, I want to see that, and then it came out, and I just never did. Right.
I get it. I understand. There's lots of movies I'll have a fleeting thought like, ooh, I want to watch this, and then I don't ever get around to it. So it happens. Oh, yeah. Too much. There's right now there's too much content everywhere. It's like movies are too accessible. I don't know. I'm getting on soapbox. I'll get off in a second, but it's like, and I'm in a lot of these '80s groups on Facebook, which is great. I enjoy seeing all the nostalgia. It helps me get through my day a lot of the times. But there's been one going around lately. It's like this generation doesn't understand the joy of going to Blockbuster. It's like Netflix is cool and all, but this generation doesn't understand the excitement of going to a Blockbuster and walking the store and finding the movie that you're going to watch that night. And it was an event. It wasn't just let me
talking to people
or getting recommendations from the people at the store and stuff like that. So I really missed that.
Speaking as someone who was one of the people working at the store giving recommendations, I also forget, I worked there for about a year and a half-ish, right towards the end, because, everybody knows Blockbuster went bankrupt in, the mid-2000s. Right. But what a lot of people don't realize, because a lot of the stores closed at that time, was then Dish Network bought it out. Right. And so there were still a few stores around until 2013 when Dish Network decided to close all the stores, except for one that they were not bought out by Dish Network.
Right.
It's a whole
watch the documentary,
and has nothing to do with Beaches. But I was one of the people that found out that Blockbuster was going to be sold or closed by Dish Network on Twitter.
Oh wow.
I was working there, I got a text from Laramie, and he says, have you seen this? And it's a screenshot of Twitter saying, Blockbuster to close all their stores by this date. And I was like, no. And then 20 minutes later, my boss texts me, and she goes, well, I don't know if you saw, but so,
wow. Yeah.
I'm not bitter at all.
Yeah, I watched the have you seen the documentary about the last Blockbuster? Yeah, yes. I watched that a while back ago. It's probably harder for you to watch than it was for me.
It was really hard because there's this scene, that probably nobody else gives a snot about. But the woman who runs the store, the store manager, she goes into the back because she bought up all the old computers from the old stores to replace parts.
The inventory thing only works on that type of computer that's been extinct for 20 years now.
I was triggered by that scene. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's mine. That's my computer. Just my head went back to that screen. I can still see that screen that was outdated long before I even started working at the store. And it was just took me back into a very uncomfortable place.
Right. Okay, well, let's...
of having to restart my computer and freezing and...
All right. Well, enough blockbuster stories. Let's get down to more uncomfortableness.
Yeah, different uncomfortable.
Right. All right. Well, unfortunately for this episode, I usually go into story origin and pre-production, and Beth and I were kind of texting back and forth earlier. It's like there really is not anything out there that gives us any history on how this movie even got made, or we know it was made, or how it kind of came to be. But this is what we kind of do know. This is very kind of brief, and I'll let Bethany add in what she knows as she watched the commentary of the movie with Gary Marshall, the director, and then she's read the book. So we're just going to kind of, it may be a little different than our normal flow, but we're just going to go with it. So here's what I have. Beaches, which was also known as Forever Friends in other countries, I think, is a 1988 film adapted by Mary Agnes Donahue and based on Iris Rayner Dart's 1985 novel of the same name. Dart wrote for the Sonny and Cher show back in the 70s, and working with Cher inspired her to create a quote-unquote no-holds-barred outrageous person, which I think is hilarious. This character later evolved into Cece Bloom, played by Bette Midler, who was a good friend of Cher and had performed together in the past. Midler shared this about her memories of this movie. She said, "Beaches was the first picture my production company, All Girls Productions, made for the studio. We were so excited because it was a musical." She said it was a musical. "My first since The Rose. Gary Marshall, who never met a gag he didn't like, filled it with bits of hilarious business. I wrote a couple of the songs, found some songs, rented some of Cher's old clothes, hired the beautiful Barbara Hershey, and were off and running. Women especially loved it, although many men have confessed to me that it always makes them cry too." End of her quote.
So one of the things that Gary Marshall mentioned in the commentary was what drew him to Beaches was you didn't see a lot of female friendship movies. He said that, at that time, a lot of people didn't want to make a movie about women because they thought it wasn't interesting. And one of the things, he's, an older man. So some of the stuff I was like, okay, stop calling them girls. They're 40s. Right. But, he's, God rest his soul. He mentioned, girls, they'll talk to each other and they'll say the most horrible things to each other. And then in the next hour, they're shopping. And I'm like, okay, that's
a little oversimplification, but okay.
Yeah, but I got what he was saying, and it's female friendships are so complex, and he wanted to get to tell that type of story. Yeah,
I think in the article that I read he was talking about the commentary, he did make a comment about a lot of the directors that were the big-time directors, quote-unquote, at that time, he said, were all making action movies, and it was all about big special effects. That was never his kind of movie to make. So he was like, he kind of was finding his niche in these type of movies that focused on women and their relationships, and it seemed to work pretty well for him. So we'll get into that a little bit more as well.
It did. I mean, I grew up loving Princess Diaries. That was one of my favorites. And, my mother will be mortified to know that I'm telling this story on a podcast. But when I was very, very way too young, I loved the movie Pretty Woman. Loved it. And she has this story that she has told me. She's going to be so devastated that I've told this. That she was taking me to daycare.
Oh, wow.
And I closed the door, or I was getting out behind her. she's walking in front of me into the daycare center, and I said, "Work it, baby, work it." So I've been a lifelong Gary Marshall fan, is what I'm trying to say.
That's awesome. That is fantastic.
So sorry, Mama.
The look she got from the other moms, I'm sure, was priceless.
Oh yeah, it was the 90s.
All right, so moving on. So the script was originally called Remember Me, and they said it actually stayed that way until pretty much almost until they were about to release it, and decided to go back with the name from the book. So producer Margaret South says that when the film was completed, they were terrified to screen it for Disney's head honchos because the stakes for their careers were high. She said Gary Marshall sat outside in his car. He had nothing to worry about. David Hoberman, who was the Disney executive, a very tough guy, fell on the floor and burst into tears at the end of the movie, she said. So she had a button made for him that said, "I cried." Which I thought was fantastic. So
that's great.
So that's really all I have as far as pre-production.
One of the things, because when I first started looking into this, I didn't understand the name. Hillary's name is totally different in the book. Okay. Actually, like, her whole character's backstory is completely different.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I just searched and searched and searched and could not figure out why. Because in the book, her name is Bertie White.
Okay, that's very different.
Yes, her father is dead, not her mother.
Okay.
She's not super wealthy. She's just middle class. She lives in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And she's like 4 or 5 years younger than Cece.
Okay.
And they never quite explain why. I couldn't find anything online explaining why they made that choice to change it. Like, I kind of understand changing the age difference. I kind of understand the mom being dead rather than the father, because then it really plays into once she gets sick, her daughter, like, she's realizing her daughter is going to go through what she went through. But at the same time, it was kind of just, the name thing really got me. I never understood why they changed it from from Bertie White to Hillary Whitney.
Well, if they were going for that difference of class between the two of them, then the Hillary gives them much more. It's a little bit more than Bertie. I mean, I can see if they're trying to tie the name to the character, it makes a little bit more sense. So
yeah, I could see that. And so if I talk about the book, I'll be referring to her as Bertie because that's who she was in the book. Because I've been driving Laramie crazy with it, because I'll be like, Hillary Bertie Hillary, and
Hillary
like,
Bird.
Okay, just tell me. Just.
And now these messages.
What's up, dudes? I'm Jerry D of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, books, fashion, and fads.
If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, he's got it covered. Wait, is there a lot of things to talk about for the 80s and Christmas?
Well, you got the movie giants like Christmas Vacation, Scrooged, and A Christmas Story. There are TV specials like Muppet Family Christmas, Claymation Christmas Celebration, and a Garfield Christmas special.
Plus classics shown every year.
You also jam out to Last Christmas, Do They Know It's Christmas, and Christmas in Hollis. But most of all, it was a time for the most bodacious, best-selling Christmas toys ever, like He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers,
and Cabbage Patch Kids.
Yes, them too. We cover them all, plus much more, including standard segments like Hap Hap Happiest Memory, Gag Me with the Spoon, The Other Half of the Battle,
and Chant with the Littles.
So tune in to Totally Rad Christmas everywhere you get your podcasts. Turn the clock back and dive into those warm and fuzzy memories.
Later, dudes.
Comic books have been around for almost a century, and in the last 2 decades, we've finally gotten to see many of these characters brought to life in movies and on TV. On the Moving Panels podcast, we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. Join me and my guests as we discuss both the good and the bad from Marvel, DC, and even some of the lesser-known comic book companies. Learn what is and isn't from the comics, as well as our nerdy review of the movie or show. New episodes drop every Monday, and you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. So join us for Moving Panels, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Gary Marshall, the late great Gary Marshall. You've already said you were a lifelong fan because of Pretty Woman. But he was known more for his TV work: Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, just to name a few. He had already directed a few movies with moderate success: Young Doctors in Love in 1982, The Flamingo Kid with Matt Dillon in 1984, Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks and Jackie Gleason in 1986. And what most people love, and has become another cult favorite, Overboard with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn in 1987.
I love Overboard.
But his first blockbuster came after Beaches, which was, of course, we mentioned already, Pretty Woman in 1990. And then, of course, that kind of set him on a trajectory of the Princess Diaries movies, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, pick a holiday. He made a movie about it with an ensemble cast. So
Princess Diaries, Princess Diaries 2. As he mentioned in his commentary, Princess Diaries 2 is like the only sequel he did because he doesn't like sequels.
I was going to ask, are you a Gary Marshall fan? But I think you've already answered that question for me. But feel free to share all the love of Gary Marshall that you can. So
I love him. He is, he's just...
I was going to ask, is he our national treasure in this episode?
He is one of two.
One of two, yeah.
One of two. I love Gary Marshall. When I was a kid, I watched Nick at Night and, Happy Days. I was obsessed with Laverne and Shirley. Yeah. Like, I wanted to be Laverne with everything in my being. I loved that she would drink Pepsi and milk. That's like all I remember about it now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Pepsi and milk. And I tried to convince myself that I liked it. I didn't. Super didn't.
No.
It's bad.
No.
Like, it gave me acid reflux, and I was like,
I believe it. I believe it.
But yeah, he is so... He took the time to let women tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
And should it have been a female director? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Gary Marshall, and he gave women a chance to... it's a book written by a woman. The script was written by... The screenplay was written by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
It was produced by a female company.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of the person who gave it the name to push it out there. And he did really well. Everyone always talks about how good he was, how easy he was to work with. He just kind of let the actors do their thing. And
Right. Yeah.
And so I was excited for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I know he talked about, he's the youngest. He's the baby, isn't he? I think so. But he has two older sisters, or he has two sisters. I don't know if he was the middle child or if he was the youngest. I don't think he was the youngest.
Not sure.
But he had two sisters and his mom. So he kind of grew up around women. So he's like, not that you can ever fully. I think he made a comment. He said, men will never understand women. He said, but I think women don't even understand women. So, which I thought was a funny quote. But yeah. So he definitely was more open to, I'm sure, their stories and their suggestions. Like you said, and unfortunately, probably at that time, to make a movie like this, a female director probably would not have had the freedom or the clout to do
the money,
the movie, or the money. Yeah, exactly. So
Disney would not have backed a movie by a female director and female cast, female producers, female writers. So for the 80s, it did a pretty good job.
Right.
As far as women are concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say I'm pretty much a Gary Marshall fan. I mean, of course, I'm more familiar with the TV stuff because I totally grew up with, when I was a kid, they didn't have Nick and Night. Nick and Night wasn't around yet. So, but those like Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, like when we would come home, that was what was on in the afternoon. Like that was the afternoon. There wasn't a bunch of talk shows and reality shows. It was just those kind of, it was... one channel would have the reruns of like Beverly Hillbillies and Sanford and Son, and one would have, Mork and Mindy and Happy Days and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think Happy Days was still on when I was really little. Like, I think I remember the last couple of seasons of that. But, so of course I knew that. And of course I was a big fan of Mork and Mindy. Mork and Mindy was on when I was a kid. So I remember watching that. But then of course getting into the movies, of course Beaches, of course Pretty Woman. He reteamed with Julia Roberts for Runaway Bride, which I thought was
loved that movie.
Another good movie. So he and Princess Diary was a little past my prime. I mean, I've seen bits and pieces, but not really there for me. But he's still great. And they did a really good special on him on ABC probably a year ago, I think. I mean, I think he passed in 2017, but that was a really good kind of glimpse into him. And so, and then of course, the movies that made us just did.
Yeah, the Pretty Woman special. That was really good. So they talked about him as well.
So just seemed to be an all-around genuine good person, and you always want those kind of people to succeed. And it was great that he had the success that he had, and made movies that will live on, that we'll continue to go back to and enjoy. Because even they're made in a certain era, they're like this movie. But it's like we talked about, the hair and the outfits tell you that it's 80s, but the story is still
Don't start
still
Gary
true.
Marshall on the hair. Oh my gosh. Back to that commentary. Every time their hair changed even the slightest, he talked about how the hair, and how he just wanted to make a movie and a submarine where everybody had crew cuts and one uniform. And it was hilarious. And one of the things he mentioned was at the very beginning, when Cece is running to her car, she's renting the car. Right. And there's the rental car guy holding an umbrella.
Yeah.
That was Gary Marshall's son.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Gary Marshall said that he told his son that if he got one drop of water on Bette Midler's head, he would not get allowance for that week. Because if her hair got wet, it took 2 hours to fix.
Wow.
And so he said, and he got his allowance that week, so.
You know, with the multiple hairstyle changes, especially towards the middle of the movie, I was wondering if Bette Midler was just wearing a wig for most of the movie, because the hair, it was probably extensions and stuff more so than a wig.
It didn't seem, now granted, he didn't seem to know that detailed of it, but it did seem to be her actual hair, because it made him crazy. Like,
I believe it.
Absolutely crazy.
All right, well, let's jump into casting while we're there, talking about the fabulous Bette Midler. She played Cecilia Carol Cece Bloom. So after Midler's breakout dramatic musical film The Rose in 1979, she found herself making comedies like Down and Out in Beverly Hills and Ruthless People in 1986, and then Outrageous Fortune in 1987, and Big Business in 1988. Beaches had its comical moments, but returned her to her dramatic and musical roots. She went on to have more success in the 90s with movies like For the Boys, Hocus Pocus, and The First Wives Club. So this was I think you said this movie was pretty much, she kind of spearheaded the whole thing. She was a producer on it. There were several things that I saw that the part of Cece was written specifically for her to play, so, or at least in the screenplay version.
Well, I mean, even in the book, she's redheaded. Like, just reading the book, I couldn't picture anyone but
Bette
Midler. I was introduced to her watching Hocus Pocus. I was a huge fan of that movie. And then, and then I went on to love First Wives Club and this movie. But this movie is, like, it was her way of saying, like, this is how I'm going to be in a musical. Is I'm going to make it, and I'm going to pick out the songs. And she is just incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she, dare I say it, is an American treasure.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
She's just incredible. I couldn't imagine anyone else playing her.
Yeah, and I'm glad there wasn't this, normally we have a list of, like, these are the people that were considered. There wasn't any of that, so I don't think there was ever anyone. Well, she was the producer.
Yeah,
she knew she was going to be
was like, and I'm going to be Cece.
Right.
It's
everyone else is going to have to work with me.
It's like the Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland shows where Mickey Rooney's like, we're putting on a show, and clearly I'm the lead. Now, what do you want to do?
Right. So matching that charisma to play the younger version of Cece, someone with just as much charisma. So they found the young Mayim But yeah, like, hopefully I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah.
Mayim, who won the role at age 12 after 4 months of auditions, said that when she started acting, her parents wrote a letter to different agents saying she was a Bette Midler, Barbara Streisand type. But she didn't think she would get the part because she wasn't a redhead. She thought she was going to be eliminated. Typical thought of an 11 or 12-year-old. So.
Yeah.
Producer Nick Abdo said she was so raw, but we really wanted her because she looked so much like Bette, even though Bette didn't think she looked like her at all. Mayim also said that director Gary Marshall and Bette had to approve everything about her for the movie. Bette didn't like how elaborate the initial choreography was for the singing dancing number she did. Bette herself redid it and taught her the moves that you see in the final movie. Midler also didn't think Mayim's singing voice was enough like hers, so they had another singer dub the song instead, which I was kind of shocked by because when I was watching the movie, I was like, man, Mayim can really sing. Like, she's really belting that song out, but it wasn't her.
Yeah. Now, apparently she can sing. She just sang like a 12-year-old.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And because she was 12. And so Bette Midler wanted her to have a bit more of an adult-sounding voice. Which, you know, even Mayim Bialik was like, yeah, no, she made a good choice. Like, it sounds really good.
Yeah. It was believable that would be her voice at a younger age, so...
She had only been acting for a year at that point when she was cast.
Wow. Yeah. She's really good in that role.
She
And that was
so
something,
good.
too, like, you know, when I saw it, of course, Blossom had not come out, which was the show that she became famous in the 90s with. But then, like, I think by the time it hit cable and I went and saw it again, I was like, oh, that's Blossom. But she was, of course, 4 or 5 years, or, a couple of years younger at that point. So I always thought that was cool.
Yeah. She even says, like, she would not have gotten the show Blossom if it weren't for the movie Beaches.
No.
Which, the movie premiered the week of her bat mitzvah.
Okay.
So the week of her bat mitzvah, she said the day of it, she was on the cover of some, like, magazine being interviewed and just how crazy everything was. She didn't realize how big of a deal everything was.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I was just going to say there was one little fun tidbit of when she's under the stairs smoking.
Oh, yeah. Yep, go ahead.
So she didn't know how to smoke because she was 12. And so her mom... or Gary Marshall was going to have, like, a prop master do it, like, start the cigarette, put it in his mouth, and then hand it to her. But her mom's like, ew, that's gross. No, if anybody's mouth is going to be on it, it's going to be family. And so her mom lit the cigarette and then would hand it to Mayim Bialik for her to pretend, or I guess she was really smoking.
Well, I did notice there was one scene where she takes a puff, but she blows the smoke right back out, so she never
she doesn't.
inhaled.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
All right. Clinton.
And I did see that it was an herbal cigarette, so it wasn't real tobacco. But she said it smelled disgusting and tasted even worse. So
they're all pretty awful.
Yeah, I was like, that's one way to keep you from smoking is give them something that smells like garbage. That's a good plan.
And it was really funny hearing Gary Marshall. I don't know how old the commentary was, because he's like, oh yeah, and she's in school now. She's going to be a scientist. She's a very smart lady. She's going to be a scientist one day. And I was like, oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, I think it came out in like 2008.
Okay.
Or it was like mid-2000s when they did that commentary. Because it was for the DVD commentary. So it might have been early to mid-2000s.
Yeah.
Because she didn't come on The Big Bang Theory until...
like 2012-ish.
Yeah, something like that. And she was already... I think she was finishing school at that point.
Yeah.
I think she was doing like double duty for the first season or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But Bialik also revealed that she and her young co-star Marcy Leeds, who played the young Hillary, are still pals. They even did a hilarious reenactment of the girls' meeting scene from the film in 2016.
Which is really cute.
Yeah. What's even more fascinating is Leeds is now a surgeon who helped treat Arizona Representative Gabby Giffords after the 2011 assassination attempt on her life. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Be a little fun fact there.
Wow.
So Marcy Leeds did not continue in acting like Mayim did, but she's doing well at what she does.
But they're both, like, super
smart. Yeah, which is probably why they're still good friends. Like,
that's awesome.
All right, so let's talk about Barbara Hershey as Hillary Birdie Whitney.
Birdie Hillary Whitney.
Yeah, there you go. One of those. So the versatile actress was first discovered by a talent agent while she was attending Hollywood High School. She started her acting career in television, but the 80s catapulted Hershey's film career when she starred in The Stuntman in 1980 with Peter O'Toole, The Entity in 1982, The Right Stuff in 83, The Natural with Robert Redford in 84, Hannah and Her Sisters in 86 with Woody Allen, Hoosiers in 86 with Gene Hackman, 10 Men in 87, Shy People in 87, and The Last Temptation of Christ in 1988. A lot of movies. Yeah. With that kind of established career, Barbara Hershey didn't have an easy audition because Midler had to leave the audition before they could run lines together, so Hershey had to play the scene against Marshall's assistant. Hershey told the Post, "My agent told me I'd done the best of all the actresses, but the studio head said there was, quote-unquote, something missing between me and Bette, and I responded, 'Did you tell him it was Bette because she left before the audition got started?'" So, but misunderstanding aside, they had terrific chemistry from then on, and she got the role. A few more things is Ann Archer and Donna Mills both auditioned for the role of the adult Hillary Whitney Essex. One of my earliest things of trivia about a movie, I remember this was all people talked about when the movie came out, was she had collagen lip injections to make herself look younger. She was actually 40 at the time and was playing Hillary from college age to mid-30s.
Which you never see.
Which I never knew what a lip injection or a collagen lip injection was until they talked about that in that movie. And so, but it was funny because I saw her in something a couple years later. I was like, her lips look really small, but because the only thing I'd ever seen her in was in Beaches. So I didn't know who Barbara Hershey was until Beaches. All those other movies I mentioned, I had never seen until that point. And some of these I still haven't seen.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen many things with her in it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because you never see that. It's always the opposite. It's always like, well, she's eventually got to be 40, so we're going to hire a 20-year-old and just throw as much aging makeup as we can at her.
Well, I did notice for those college shots, they're all wide and far away. So they didn't, Gary Marshall was smart to, use the camera to his advantage and not do any tight close-ups when they're supposed to be like 18, 19, 20. So,
but one thing that he mentioned during the commentary was they auditioned like 5 or 6 Hillarys.
Okay.
And he said they all did a great job, but it's all about chemistry. It all had to come down to chemistry with Bette Midler. So they had filmed a screen test with, Hillary or with Barbara Hershey and a few other actresses with Bette Midler. And so he watched those screen tests with no sound on.
Okay.
And Barbara Hershey's just shown the most chemistry out of all of them with no sound, which I thought was an interesting way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because body language tells more than the dialogue will a lot of times.
Yeah, because the words could change.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can rehearse the words, but you can't rehearse like that chemistry between two people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yes.
So of course we hit the main people. I'm going to touch on a few others, but not everybody in the cast. But I'll talk about John Hurd as John Pierce. John Hurd was a very talented actor who established himself as a respected thespian in the late 70s and early 80s, though he is perhaps best known for his turn as Peter McAllister, Kevin's dad in the Home Alone movies. But in the early 80s, it would not have been unreasonable to predict that Hurd would become an Oscar winner or a multiple nominee. He worked with A-list projects, playing the not-so-sympathetic son of Geraldine Page in The Trip to Bountiful in 1985, for which Page won her own Oscar, and he was Tom Hanks' adult rival in Big in 1988. So, which I remember him in that. But he did become more of a supporting roles kind of guy, like he is in this. But I thought he was still pretty good. But yeah, as soon as he came, I was like, it's Kevin McAllister's dad from Home Alone.
Yeah, the father of the most dangerous man alive.
Right.
Kevin McAllister. So one of the things that's different in the book with this character, John Pierce, Cece meets him during summer stock. And he's kind of known as this womanizer. Like, he picks the youngest girl in the cast and sleeps with her. because he knows that she just wants to get apart, and he's like, fine, as long as you sleep with me. But so Bertie comes to see her, and she ends up helping backstage.
Okay.
And she's 16 at the time, because like I said, there's like a 4 or 5 year age difference.
Right.
And so she sleeps with him, and she's 16, and then she has to go home, and that's when Cece and him start their relationship.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of a grosser way
for
that story to go.
Yeah, I didn't know the details. A few things I said that they did talk about, that he was a pedophile, that in the book he was a pedophile, but they decided not to bring that part of his story into the movie. So
that's a wise choice, because the book does not condemn that choice in any way, shape, or form. It's just a thing that happens. And I'm like, she was 16 years old. Let's calm down a minute.
All right, so moving right along, Lainey Kazan as Liana Bloom, Cece's mother. She did not want to play Cece's mother, but eventually said yes in order to work with Bette Midler. She was actually only 5 years older than Bette, her on-screen daughter. Kazan has contributed her talents to an endless list of film and television project roles. Perhaps her most talked about role is the hilarious mom Maria in My Big Fat Greek Wedding and its sequel, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2.
Love that movie.
She was also Barbra Streisand's understudy in Funny Girl in Broadway when she was on Broadway.
Really? That's awesome. Yeah. I did not know that. Good for her.
Very talented, doing a lot of stuff. So, according to Shelley Winters in a 1989 appearance on the Sally Jesse Raphael show, Bette Midler wanted Shelley Winters to play her mother in the film, but Winters said she turned it down because she was afraid she wouldn't pass the insurance exam, because she was in her 80s, I think, at that point, so she wasn't sure she was healthy enough to be on the film. So, and then the last cast member we'll talk about, unless you want to bring anybody up, Bethany, Grace Johnston as Victoria Essex. Beaches was Grace Johnston's theatrical film debut after appearing on a few TV shows. She went on to play Michael Keaton's daughter in One Good Cop in 1991. She continued to work steadily in television and independent films well into adulthood. So she didn't have any other major film roles, but
no.
I thought she did really good in the role for that.
She really did. Gary Marshall talked about how talented she was. He wasn't sure if she was still acting at the time, but one of the things that he talked about, he's like, she was a kid, so you couldn't keep her attention for very long. Right. And so what he would do is he would bring out a pencil and he would connect the dots of her freckles. And that would get her all excited, and then she would go back into the scene. And one of the other things, another story he told, was she didn't want to look at the grave of her mom at the end. She just didn't want to look at it, and he wanted that moment where she had that one final look, like her goodbye. And so there was like a bee that was buzzing around, and so Gary Marshall told her, he's like, that bee is over by the grave. You need to watch out for it so it doesn't get you. And so her eyes were just like glued to it because she didn't want to get stung by the bee. So that was, he was funny in the commentary. He kept talking about how this was a day when we had to do a lot of freckle tracing.
Yeah, I didn't see how old she was when she made the movie. So she had to have been, she was young. Yeah. I know at the end, Bette says, me and your mom were your age when we met, so got to think like 10 or 11, probably.
I know in the book she was like 6 or 7.
Okay.
But yeah, she does say we were about your age, which they were supposed to be 11, I think, in the movie. They don't really stop and take a minute to say, like, the year was 1985.
Right.
So just a couple of things I wanted to throw out there because Gary Marshall hires his entire family
yes, he
to be in these movies. But he has a voice in it when she does the Broadway audition. That was his voice.
I recognize his voice immediately.
His daughter played a nurse. His wife played a nurse. Apparently his dad was in one of the scenes. Hillary's Aunt Vesta, the woman that came into the restaurant, she was his smoking therapist. And she helped Gary Marshall and Henry Winkler stop smoking.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And then Marge, the drunk woman that slept outside of Cece's, she was his executive assistant. So,
was she telling him slow down on the gas or something? She had some line.
Slow down on the gas. It's bad for your complexion.
Right.
Bless her. Is she dead? Nah, she was dead. She would drop the bottle.
Yeah.
I do love that scene.
And now, these messages.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Well, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.
Well, let's talk about scenes. So let's talk about iconic. So when you close your eyes and think about beaches, what is the one scene that comes to mind, or what's the most iconic scene for you in the movie?
It's them meeting on the beach. I don't know why that scene always sticks out in my head. Her her seeing the little girl under the boardwalk and then coming out. And I don't know why that has just always stuck in my head, that scene. And basically any of the musical numbers.
Yeah.
The industry song, which was written by Bette Midler. That song sticks in my head because it's so weird.
Yeah.
And then the Braciere song sticks in my head because it's so silly.
Yeah.
But, and then I was upstairs after I finished watching the movie singing The Glory of Love over and over and over again. So, just the music in it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a hard one for me because I don't think of one specific scene. It's more like glimpses. Like there's different, like it says, the musical numbers. The Braciere song has always been hilarious to me.
Yeah.
And funny story, maybe not so funny, because I had listened to the soundtrack so many times, and that was one of the songs that it was kind of like, it was one of those guilty pleasures. I was like, I should not like this song as much as I do, but it's just, the wordplay in it is so great. It's just, it's so clever. And so I was dating a girl in college, and I went shopping with her, and of course she was going to look for, intimates, as they would call it at the store. And I said, "Oh, you're looking for an over-the-shoulder boulder holder."
How did that relationship work out, Tim?
She did not know what I was talking about and thought I was being very crude and crass, especially because she did not have boulders. So anyway,
Timothy.
That's all I'm going to say about that story.
Oh, that's so funny.
But yeah, so that line has always stuck out to me. So anyway, but iconic scenes. Probably the death scene is probably the most. That's. I mean, as soon as the movie starts, like that's where you're going. It's like if you've seen it once, you know where this movie is going to take you, and so.
That scene where she falls on the floor and her daughter, and she says the phrase, her going, "I don't know what to do," is so relatable. Like, there have been moments where you've been an adult and scared, and you're just like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
Like, I can't imagine being that young and seeing your mom. You knew she was sick, but now it's all coming to a head and you don't know what to do. Right. That sweet baby.
Yeah. And then even the scene when they're outside, and I think this goes to like just acting and Barbara Hershey being so great, but the scene where they're on the beach and she's like struggling to breathe when they're having that conversation, it's just, it just tears. I mean, it's just, it brings the emotion out because it's like, it's hard. It's hard. So, and I will say, because if I do get tear-eyed, I will say, we had originally planned to do this episode a few months ago. But unfortunately, it fell around the same time that a good friend of ours passed away from cancer. So I was like, I cannot do this episode. There's no way I can get through it. And
I said that is totally understandable.
So we pushed it, but I will say, watching it today, it was still hard to get through some of those moments. So that's if I'm a blubbering mess by the end of this, that's why.
Yeah. Speaking of blubbering mess, so that sunset scene when she sees her on the beach and they go and talk. Gary Marshall had "Wind Beneath My Wings" playing on the loudspeaker to help get that emotion going. And he noticed that a lot of the crew had on sunglasses, and he got really frustrated. And he went to Dante Spinotti, who was the cinematographer, and he's like, they can't see. They're wearing sunglasses. I don't know what you want. He's like, these men have tattoos all over their body, and they're crying. They can't be seen crying. And so they put on sunglasses. He says, every time you play this song, they start crying.
Yes.
So he said, oh, okay. I understand now.
Yeah, I had read, like, for her actual death scene, that the entire crew had become so tight and, really saw them as these two characters because, the chemistry and the relationship they had, that they say when they actually had that scene, like, the whole crew was, like, completely falling apart. But Barbara Hershey's teenage son, that was, like, his first day on the set to watch his mom. He's like, what's wrong with these people? She's just acting. It's not like it's real or anything. And they're like, you don't understand. We've connected with these people on an emotional level. So, but yeah. But yeah, I could see, you're playing that song in the background as well. Oh yeah, it's.
Yeah. Honestly, the part, and I don't know why this gets me choked up, but she's finished singing the very end of the movie. She sings, Glory of Love. She's walking off stage with her daughter, whose name I can't remember, Victoria. Right. And then it's empty, and you hear the younger versions of them talk. And it flashes to them doing the photo booth.
Right.
And I just...
Right.
Oh
right.
My gosh.
Like, just gut me one more time. Because honestly...
Yeah.
I mean... When she finishes the song, I noticed it this time. I don't know if I ever noticed it before. It's been so long since I've seen it, which I didn't talk about that earlier. But it's been probably 20 years since I've seen this movie. I mean, it's been a long time. So, but that last part of Glory of Love, where she kind of, with her hand, she lifts her hand, is like she's allowing her to.
She's waving.
Yeah, and then she waves, and it fades to black, and I'm like, credits, we're done. We don't need anything else. And then you get this extra scene of them walking or telling the story, and then you add the voiceover at the end. I was like, oh, come on, man. You just got to, jab me a couple of times in the heart.
Yeah, Gary Marshall actually talked about how the movie Beaches has 7 endings. And so as each part comes to a close and you think, okay, that's the end, he goes, and this is ending number 5. This is ending number 7, and here's the real ending.
Right. Wow.
So
yeah, it's like Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. I didn't think that movie would ever end. It had like 16
oh my gosh, that movie was never going to end. I had to go to the bathroom, and I kept thinking, okay, it's almost done now. Nope, still going.
I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. We went to was it a midnight showing? Back when they did midnight showings. Now they do them at 8 o'clock. But these were movies that when my wife and I were dating and right after we got married, these were our movies we would go see when they came out. And so I had worked like I had not gotten much sleep that whole week. And I was completely exhausted. But we're like, we're going to go to this movie. And I think the midnight was sold out, but they had at 12:30. I said, okay, we'll do the 12:30.
Oh, no.
Not realizing the movie was 4 hours long, and so it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just like, this movie is great, but I'm like, I have got to go to sleep. And it was like, it's not over yet. And it was like, and now Bilbo's gonna say goodbye to this person. Now he's got to go say goodbye to the elves. I was like, so it took me a long time to want to watch that movie again because like once I started, it's never gonna end. So
I don't think I've ever watched it a second time because I was so mad at the ending. No, I have a similar story for when we went to go see the Avengers. We actually saw it at midnight, and I had been at work all day. And I think I slept through that the fight scene.
So I had the extended editions now, but I used to have the extended editions on DVD, and we would start Wednesday before Thanksgiving. When we got off early for Thanksgiving, because Tyra would be cooking, and she's like, "We'll just put on a movie, we'll watch." So that became like our, all day Wednesday into Thanksgiving Day, and then Thanksgiving Day we'd watch the whole trilogy. So we did that for a long time. So that was
so
like our little
sweet.
tradition.
Then you had a kid, and they have opinions.
She's not gonna make it through it now. So, but
no.
All right, back to the 80s. We were having our so.
Oh yeah.
All right, so
sorry.
do you have a favorite scene, or any favorite scenes?
I'll have to say, I think my favorite scene, I really loved watching Mayim Bialik sing "The Glory of Love." I don't know why that scene really got me. I love her little attitude. She sings so cute. It's so peppy. I just want to sing that song all day long. And then her mom is in the audience doing the whole theater mom thing which is just hysterical. As a theater mom, when I sit and watch my kid, and I just have to have my hand over my mouth.
Sit on your hands. Don't make a move. No sudden moves.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it, Bethany.
Yeah, I love that scene. And my other favorite scene, comes right after that, is when Bette Midler's older and she's doing her audition, and she gives him a little piece of music, and she does her part of "Glory of Love," and then the guy comes in behind, "Sarah, Sarah." And I was like, that is so funny.
Gary Marshall kept wanting to cut that scene. When he came out, he said, we just kept trying to cut it for time, but we just had to leave it in. It was too funny. And
I wonder, because I was like, you would think once he start a note or two in, they would cut to the next scene, but they let him finish the whole thing. But he was really good. It was really good.
I'm trying to look at some of my notes from. So, okay, the Falcon Theater. I thought this was kind of weird and cryptic. So Gary Marshall was talking about how he names a lot of things in his movies after falcons, because he ran with a crowd in the Bronx when he was a kid called the Bronze Falcons, and they were broken up by the police in 1949.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then he said that they were a famous baseball and basketball club. I don't know if that was before or after they were broken up by the police, and why did the police break them up? I couldn't figure it out. But he just dropped that little nugget in there, and I was impressed. And then Hector Elizondo.
Yes.
He's their preacher, or the judge.
The judge that marries them. Right. Who's been in every Gary Marshall movie.
You notice his neck is in a neck brace. He had to do, apparently, this really quick turn of his head when she slaps him, and his neck would crack too loudly. And so they put his neck in a neck brace to muffle the sound.
That is awesome.
I thought that was really funny. But one of the things Gary Marshall mentioned, he said, people ask me all the time, why do I hire the same people over and over again? And he goes, because I work with big stars, and big stars have big personalities and need a lot of attention. And I need people there who I can speak to in shorthand and not have to pay that much attention and know that they're going to get the job done, so that I can pay attention to the... And basically, he's like, I work with a bunch of divas.
Yeah.
And I need people that can do what they've got to do so that I can focus on the divas.
Right. Well, let's talk about a few, of course, Hector Alonso is, he's notorious for being in all of Gary Marshall's movies. And then I think I read something where there is a Falcon Theater, and Hector Alonso was directing a show at the Falcon Theater around that time, or sometime later. So I thought that was interesting.
He did mention that there is a Falcon Theater in California.
Okay.
But that he initially got the name Falcon from the Bronze Falcons. I don't know what the deal is with Bronze Falcons. I did a quick Google, didn't find anything other than a bunch of Bronze Falcons.
So there was also, and I should have wrote down the actor's name, but the person that played Carmine in Laverne and Shirley was also in the movie. He was one of the actors in the first play where she was the nurse or the
guard,
prison guard, right? So I recognized him immediately, and I also know I recognized him again because I just watched A League of Their Own a few months ago with Penny Marshall, of course, and he was in that as one of the dancers. So I picked him up. But another person, not because they're connected to Gary Marshall, but in the Braciere song, Otto Titsling, the main character, that the main diva in the story, that is Jennifer Lewis, who we know now from Blackish as the mom on Blackish.
That's awesome.
Yeah. When I was like, I mean, she's much younger there, but when she started to sing, I was like, wait a minute, I think that's Jennifer Lewis. And I was watching the credits at the end, and she had her full name in the credits, so she had like a middle name. It was Jennifer something Lewis. I was like, wow, that's really her. So I thought that was cool. Before they were famous moments.
I love stuff like that. Yeah. So, and then that back to Penny Marshall and A League of Their Own. There's a fight in they do that fight scene in Bloomingdale's where Betty Spaghetti from League of Their Own is the store clerk.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
But he mentioned this in during this scene, is he filmed it without cuts. So the only cuts are between two different cameras.
Okay.
He had two different cameras set up on two different tracks. And they did it in 4 takes.
Wow.
And he said, most actors, they need, they can do 3 lines and then it's cut. And then we reset. He said they did the entire scene 4 times. And they just had to choreograph it. And they walked all around Bloomingdale's. And it was very seamless. Which I thought was, watching it with that in mind, I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. That's it's like a stage play.
Yeah.
Which you don't see often.
It has a moment. There were a couple of moments where I was like, "This, I could see this being," which eventually became a Broadway musical, which I didn't really get all those details for the podcast, but there was a Broadway musical of it as well. But I could see it working really well as a stage production, even without the musical numbers. I think it would still work, or maybe not a full blown musical, but a production with some musical numbers in it. So
there's not a lot of action to it. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of conversation and dialogue. And so that really feeds well into plays where it's conversations rather than things actually going on.
But going back to Bloomingdale's, you do know that that's not a real Bloomingdale's, right?
Yeah, it's a hotel?
Well, it was a set. Well, whatever set it was, it's the same set where she had been filming Big Business with Lily Tomlin, Bette Midler had.
That's right.
So they actually did a screen test in that same Bloomingdale's between Barbara Hershey and Bette Midler, but they say you know it because of the carpet. The carpet is very distinctive, and so they said that was.
I think I'd read that. I just didn't remember all the details of it.
Because they said Bette was still, when they were doing casting, Bette was still working on Big Business, so they were like, "Hey, can we just use this section?" And they're like, "Sure." And then when they came to shoot Beaches, like, "Hey, can we go back and use that same?" Whatever, if it was a real store or if it was a studio, but I just thought
it was a hotel.
It might have been. It's very possible. Because in the screen test, it's very bare. Because I watched a little bit of the screen test on YouTube when I was working on some of this, and the scene that takes place when Hillary comes to the club that Bette Midler's Cece's complaining about. My agent said it was going to be this. So that scene they used for the screen test in the Bloomingdale's section. But that whole scene, it was just like that ugly carpet and like a yellow couch. Yeah. And that's where they filmed the little screen test. But it was pretty cool.
One other thing. So, when Hillary goes to the library in order to learn all she can about the disease she has, the ballad that she's singing, that Bette Midler's singing over it, was written by Randy Newman.
Oh, wow.
Yes. which it's such a beautiful song. She's got that green background behind her, and
that's I Think It's Gonna Rain Today song.
Yeah. It was written by Randy Newman. Favorite
scenes. It's hard. This is another one. This isn't one of those. This is a different kind of movie for favorite scenes.
Yeah.
But I mentioned the audition scene. I think was great.
Yeah.
I do like the scene that I was just talking about in the theater or in the club when they kind of have their redemption moment, which I just love that. Yeah. I love the dialogue. I love the interaction. I love it just feels very genuine. It's a great scene.
I think, just to play off of that, it's a little bit different in the book. So, first of all, Birdie's husband, like her relationship with her husband is completely toxic from the start. They never have a good relationship. And then Birdie and her husband go on vacation with Cece and John. And Cece's also has a drug addiction problem in the book. But when Hillary or Birdie goes to bed, she overhears her husband and Cece in the living room, and he tries to seduce her and get her to sleep with him. And so she runs off. Cece says, I would never do that to her. But that's not what Birdie hears. So she decides to never speak to her again. So they don't speak. And then Hillary or Birdie, her mother is in the hospital in Miami, which is where Cece is performing. And she runs into her in the hotel lobby. And Cece tells her off, and she says, how dare you? Who gave you the right to end our friendship like that? And without telling me anything. Like, I have no idea what happened. And anyway, so she leaves thinking that they're not going to be friends anymore. And she does at one point tell her, my mother's sick. She's in the hospital. And there's been this ongoing thing about how Cece doesn't like hospitals because Leona was in the hospital. Birdie is back in the hospital. She's hungry. It's been a long day. And then Cece walks in and she's got 2 platters of food for everyone to eat. And then she thinks that, they've forgiven each other. She thinks Cece leaves, but then it turns out that she's actually gone into her mother's room and is singing her this song that she knows that she used to sing to Birdie when she was a kid. And that scene in that book killed me. Like, I was just like, I wish something like I could just picture Bette Midler doing all of this stuff. And I could see her singing, and she's surrounded by nurses and she's singing to her mother or her friend's mother who's sick. And it's a that was my favorite scene in the book. That I wish had been in the movie.
Right. Any other big differences that you want to cover now, or?
Not a ton. Like I said, just the names were different. The fact that her mom was still living. But for the most part, they stuck with it. Cece had drug problems, and then her career was going down, and she was staying with Birdie while she was pregnant. She got clean. She started losing weight. She met the doctor, fell in love with him, and then got called back to, New
York, right?
New York, or it may have been Hollywood. But either way, she was still there when she gave birth on Halloween. But one of the reasons why the book was called Beaches was every time they met was at a beach. It was a different beach.
Okay. See, I kind of wondered about that. I mean, I get it because it starts at the beach and it kind of ends at the beach.
Yeah. So every time they meet, they first meet in Atlantic City, and then she does summer stock, and it's at this place that's next to like a lake beach type thing. And then they meet in Miami, and then they meet in California, and every little scene takes place at the beach.
Gotcha. That makes some more sense.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's talk about Wind Beneath My Wings. So,
oh boy,
Mark Shaman, the film's music supervisor, said that the iconic song almost didn't make it in the movie. He said they wanted Bette to do an original song so it would be up for an Oscar nomination. And of course, he wanted the chance to write that song. But Shaman said he always had Wind Beneath My Wings in mind for a template of a song. He had loved Larry Henley and Jeff Silbar's 1982 song since the first time he heard it. He invited Midler and producer Bonnie Bruckheimer and director Gary Marshall to his tiny rental house in Los Angeles to play it for them. He said, I sang it with my back to them because the piano was facing the other way. When I turned around, they were all awash with tears. That song spot was locked from that moment on. So ended up being the song that he loved used as a template. They took it anyway. So, but yeah, it very well epitomizes the story of the song. I think it did what it needed to do.
Yes, it's very perfect. That song really, it always takes me back when Laramie's grandmother passed away.
Okay.
She specifically asked that he sing that song at her funeral. Mm-hmm. And so my head always goes back to him singing that at her graveside. Because, and it's just a beautiful song. And it says so much without, but, you know, anybody who has any sort of success, it's because somebody supported them, typically.
Right.
Whether it's, you know, a lot of it's self-motivation, but you can only get so far without someone supporting you. And a lot of times that person doesn't get recognized, and they're not doing it for recognition.
Exactly, yeah.
And so that song's so beautiful. It's just such a precious way of saying, like, you know, I hope you know that I do see what you've done for me and that I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I want to say I sang this, because back when they had the little performance tracks, which, you know, I know Laramie's used several. And I think it was for like a senior appreciation dinner when I was in high school. I think it was a senior, and it was something either for the staff or for, it might have been like Grandparents' Day, or it was some kind of special assembly thing. And one of the teachers knew that I sang, because in high school I didn't sing with the choir. I was in the theater group. We were a brand new school, so we hadn't built up any kind of drama department. We just did improv every day. That's all we had the money to do. You know, it's like, you know,
make your own props,
right?
With your imagination,
right? Whose Line Is It Anyway was just starting to come on Comedy Central, and so it was like our teacher would like bring in recordings of that, and we'd watch it, and then like, which like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday was like we would do our own improv stuff. So anyway, I'm way off the subject, but anyway, I remember singing that for that event. And I think that was the first time I think the lyrics kind of hit me in a more personal level than just, oh, it's a pretty song and I like the way it sounds and I can sing it well and all that kind of stuff. But the lyrics of it and seeing these, you know, seniors with the staff or I can't, like, is it Grandparents' Day or staff? I don't remember. But just seeing these relationships as I was singing, it added a new element of that song for me when I sang it. So yeah. All right. Let's move to something else.
Yeah. Enough of that mushy stuff.
Yeah, well, this isn't going to be much better. But anyway, the disorder that Barbara Hershey develops is known as viral cardiomyopathy. That's why I'm not a doctor. I can't say these big words.
That's the only requirement, is being able to say big words. So.
And have horrible handwriting, which I'm 1 out of 2. So the most common cause of this disorder is infection from the Coxsackie B virus, which drastically weakens the heart, eventually keeping it from pumping the sufficient amount of blood necessary to keep the patient alive. As depicted in the film, it truly was fatal in all reported cases when the movie was made. But since 2005, thousands have been saved with beta blockers and implantable cardio defibrillators. So,
yay, science!
Right, one good, you know, bad but good is that, you know, what she suffered from, we've been able to. Not say find a cure for, but have been able to bring those numbers down. So, but
yeah, if only she could have had something like, I don't know, something we could pronounce.
Right. She says it really well in the movie because she says like that's
cardiomyopathy.
Cardio. I'm sure if you say it enough times, it rolls off the tongue. But you know, it just looks like a big word to me. Cardiomyopathy.
Slightly unrelated. there was a book I read where it was Lauren Graham's book, and she talked about how when you write a scene with medical information in it, until you can actually talk to some sort of consultant to tell you what words to say, in the script it just says medical. And so I always think of that when I watch a scene with doctors in it, as, you know, for a long time the actor was looking at it and saying, like, she has medical.
Right.
Which is...
The treatment will be medical.
Medical, and then she medical.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny. That probably makes a lot of sense, though. I'm sure that's what they do.
Yeah.
So, script writers, like, I gotta love them.
Bless their hearts.
Yeah.
They're not doctors.
No, they're not. All right, let's talk about box office and critical reception.
Okay.
We'll start wrapping this one up. Beaches had a limited theatrical release on December 23rd, 1988, in just 7 theaters, but still came in 15th at the box office that week. The film took in $5 million during its official opening weekend beginning January 21st, 1989, and it came in second at the box office behind Rain Man. It was considered a box office success after bringing in over $57 million domestically during its full run. So it's kind of a weird thing because everywhere I look, it's like it came out in 1988, which it did, but it was only in 7 theaters
it's like
in 88.
Christmas.
Yeah, so
yeah.
It's like it didn't go wide until 89. But anyway, so... but yeah, it still did really well. I mean, coming in, I think Rain Man was in its second week, so it was still at number 1, but it debuted at number 2, which was, you know, at that time, you know, in the Christmas box office season, that's still
that's really good.
Really good. So
that's awesome.
So Rotten Tomatoes has a 40% on the tomato meter and an 88% audience score. IMDb has it as 7.7 out of 10 with a 46 on Metacritic. The critics just did not like this movie at all. So
I guess I'm more on IMDb side of, like, it's a solid 7.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not a perfect film.
No.
I'm sorry, Barbara Hershey, there's some times when she's supposed to have a very dramatic moment, and it doesn't hit right. But for the most part, it's a really good movie. Yeah. And it tells a story that doesn't get told very often.
Right.
Which is female friendship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a solid 7 with you, because I wish there was more of their... I wish we saw more of their relationship to get there.
Yeah.
Like, I think...
Like, they're good relationships.
Right. The musical moments are great, but they almost interfere with telling their story. So when you get to the end, it's still emotional, but I don't feel the emotional punch as hard as I would if I saw more of their relationship. Like, there are a couple of times, like, why are you guys even friends? Like, why do you want to hang out with each other? I know you met each other when you were 10, but now why do you still become friends? I don't think we got enough of those moments. I think you get it there at the beginning when they're living together in the apartment, but then as their lives kind of grow apart, they would still have fun times. I mean, I think about the relationships my wife has had, and I'm sure you've had with other people, or relationships I have. Relationships aren't by gender. So a relationship I had with a friend of mine that I may not see for 5 or 6 years, but when we talk, it's like that time and distance doesn't matter. It's like we're still close because there's a bond, whether it's 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, you still have that connection. And I don't think it portrayed that as well as it could have, even though it's still a good movie. I just don't think I think it relied a little bit too much on Bette Midler's performances, which were fun and were great, and each one I enjoyed. But at the end of the day, if you took those out,
would there have been time to tell that more of that story?
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah, because it's right at 2 hours movie, so it's not like they, if they cut all the musical numbers out, you might be like 145 maybe. So if you bump that in with a little bit more of the character development, more of their relationship, just them hanging out, and it's cliched, but even if you had a montage of things that they did together to help kind of build that, would have
more of them playing cards even.
Yeah,
because they had that sprinkled throughout, but I don't think it was sprinkled throughout enough. To like really hit home at the very end when they're playing, and again, with the whole thing with hair, she's got her hair in that towel, and Gary Marshall is so tickled because it only took 20 minutes to do her hair that day. But, you know, I feel like that moment would have hit a little bit better if it were for the fact that they had sprinkled some more of those moments throughout. Those sweet... Like, I love that moment, going back to favorite scenes, when it's Christmas, and they're laying in bed, and they're singing the Christmas songs. And I sang all those dreidel songs with you.
One dreidel
song.
Yeah, let's sing whatever the song in Latin. Like, who knows?
Oh, come all ye faithful!
Yeah.
In Latin.
Right.
But I mean, I do have one of my oldest friends. I've been friends with her for 20 years. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. We were college roommates, graduated high school together, met in 6th grade. Just got engaged this weekend.
Oh, congratulations.
So we were, you know, it's one of those things where, yeah, female friendship, she and I have yelled at each other and screamed at each other and been like borderline about to punch each other in the face. But she is also one of my oldest, dearest friends. And just, female friendship works weird. I mean, all friendships work weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
just all people are weird. Humans are weird.
Going back to Gary Marshall's comment about men, we can be stubborn, but I think as you mature and you get older, you don't hold those grudges like you do when you're younger. And so, I've apologized to friends, people I was really close with, and then we had a falling out. And then I see him, 5 or 10 years later, I'm like, man, I'm so sorry. I was like, I hadn't even thought about that. Don't even worry about it. And it's like, you're holding on to something.
Like, I've carried this for
I've been
20
thinking
years.
That
Can you please accept my apology?
Yeah. I've been walking around thinking if you saw me, just punch me in the face when you saw me because of how I treated you or because I said something that I shouldn't have said or whatever. And then it's like, it's no big deal. So, but anyway.
Friendship's universal. And it's nice when it's a story, there's some love sprinkled in, but that's not what the story's about at all.
And I'm glad it wasn't that as well.
Honestly, like the book is even less because the books, like both the men are kind of bleh. Like you don't really care for either one of their husbands. And so it's nice that the focus is on their relationship with each other. That's the point of the story. That's the driving factor. And I kind of wish that in this movie, Bette Midler didn't end up going back. She doesn't end up dating the John guy again. But I kind of wish she didn't go back to him. Like, she could just move forward.
Right. She wouldn't
where it felt like she went back.
Yeah, because it did feel that way, knowing that she left the doctor to go back. It's a big role. She didn't say anything about him being he was the director or whatever. He wanted to. And so that scene did feel...
pointless.
Yeah. It's like...
Unnecessary.
Yeah, unnecessary. That's the word. It was unnecessary. It's like, I would have rather her just had a big opportunity with a network or a bigger show or a bigger director, have a good Gary Marshall have a cameo. I don't even need to
see the director.
Something else. So I didn't think that was it. And it did kind of allude to, maybe they're going to get back together even though it's never, fulfilled on. Or maybe they wanted that resolution of where when they left, they didn't leave on the best of terms and wanted to kind of closure.
I kind of felt like they did have that closure on the steps of that theater where he was just like, this is not me.
Right.
You go out, you do which was noble. I think that's great. That's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He said, that's what you love. Go do it. It's not for me. I'm staying here.
Yeah.
And that felt like closure to me. So I don't understand why it was necessary for him to come back around and say, oh, and also... you're going to work for me again. Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well,
still a good movie, though.
Still a good movie. Yeah, it's like we're nitpicking at this point. It's still enjoyable.
Yeah.
Once again,
that's when you know it's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's when you can nitpick it.
Yeah, and still love it. And still appreciate it for what it is. Because once again, it's still great. It's still worth watching. It's not something you want to put in, every weekend and just if you want to just skip to all the musical performances and skip the story, it's fine.
Just buy the soundtrack on a cassette tape. Stick it in your car, and just ride around with it all the time.
There you go. All right, well, thank you, Bethany, so much for being a part of this episode. It's always a pleasure to have you on. We'll pick a fun movie next time. Let's no more tearjerkers for a while.
Okay, Terms of Endearment. I haven't seen that one. Is that one?
That one's no. We don't want to do that one. All right, thanks, Bethany, so much. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation, we have a few ways for you to do just that. One way is to send us an email to movieviewspodcast@gmail.com. You can also leave us a voice message through the Anchor app. You can find the link to leave a voice message in our episode show notes. Another way to reach us is through our social media pages. Search for 80s Flick Flashback on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, be sure to give us a 5-star rating along with a stellar written review. And don't forget to follow us on Apple and Spotify as well. No matter which podcasting platform you're listening to us on, be sure to read the episode show notes to find more fun facts and behind-the-scenes trivia we just weren't able to fit into today's episode. Well, that's all for now. Join us again next time for another 80s Flick Flashback.